As always, plenty of movement, appointments in the media sector. James, just take us through some of the latest. Peter Lewis joining...
Yeah, Peter Lewis, a good get for Southern Cross Austereo, of course, for Chief Financial Officer for Seven there for a while. He worked, did briefly consulted to the government on that report we saw last week. And yeah, he's landed at Southern Cross Austereo. Makes you wonder if there might be a few bigger things in the pipeline for Southern Cross Austereo, because he could certainly handle any acquisitions, mergers, whatever. He'd be the guy to have there.
And a few promotions at BBC Worldwide Australia.
Yeah, look, Fiona Lang's been made Chief Operating Officer, Alistair McEwen, the Director of Ad Sales, and Irene Reid is taking over. Good operator, Irene, looks after all the TV acquisitions, specialist knowledge there, so she'll do well in that new role.
And back to radio, Fairfax Radio appointing Andrew Sidwell to a new division.
Yeah, look, he's returning to radio. He used to be at Southern Cross Austereo. He's had time out working at Media Brands, and it's called National Content Solutions. I don't think it's unlike the role he had at Southern Cross Austereo, but it's a new role for the Fairfax Radio Network.
And Nova Entertainment, an appointment there, Melissa Turner.
Melissa Turner, yeah, going to look after direct in Sydney, but not just the radio, everything in the Nova Group in the Sydney market.
Interesting news too from iHeartRadio this week, starting a music news station.
Yeah, look, it is. It's we've heard a lot about iHeartRadio. We had the Chief Executive, Kieran Davis, in here when they launched. We've heard now they've had over 300,000 downloads of that iHeartRadio app, which is pretty good. Over 200,000 registered users. So you've got to be pretty motivated to actually go to the trouble to register. And they started, yeah, a music news station and some demos on their audience. 62% are all 25 to 54. So it's some interesting opportunities perhaps for advertisers there now with that part of ARN.
Okay, let's turn to TV now. The latest TV ratings is for week 18. We'll have a look at the top 10 for free-to-air first. Well, they're obviously...
Yeah, look, it's all Seven. It was actually a record week for Seven. It was one of their best weeks, I think, all people in a couple of the demos for nearly a decade, if you discount some of the Olympic Games fortnights.
And just turning the page, House Rules, of course, we're going to be talking about this one in a bit more detail in a moment, but they're appearing.
Sure, yeah, a couple of shows there from Nine that Seven are having trouble replicating their figures again this week, so there's some programming there which will see next week's chart, The Voice in particular, which has been doing well for the opposition.
And having a look at subscription TV, the top 5 sport programs for week 18 there. Fox Footy obviously benefiting from the AFL. And just looking at the top 5 non-sport. And
yeah, Game of Thrones holding up very well. Movie there too, and Real Housewives of Melbourne doing well for Arena.
Yeah, and just on Real Housewives of Melbourne, of course, news this week too that there's going to be a
commission a second season. Yeah, they'll do well. I'm not sure if they'll be able to get all the original cast back together, because if you've seen any of the reunion specials, there's still one to come this weekend. There's a lot of tension there between those ladies, so I'm not sure if they'd all want to be back for a second season, but it could be good if they introduce some new blood too.
Yeah. Just on to some other news as well, and interesting to see the way iView did a preview of the John from Tonga series coming up.
Yeah.
How did it go?
We heard there were 500,000 plays. Whatever that means, I'm not sure. So there were 6 episodes put up. So if a play equates to watching a whole episode, I'm not sure it does. That could have been about maybe 100,000 different people, maybe a little bit more because they wouldn't have all watched. So maybe 150,000 maybe people, but the show started this week on free-to-air. Not so good for Chris Lilly debut, about 400,000, just over 400,000. That's the lowest of all these sort of series for all these different characters over about the last 7 years. That's the lowest opening audience. But personally, I quite like Jonah. I think he's a really funny guy. But yeah, if you don't like Jonah, you know, the character is very, you either love him or hate him.
Right. And just finally, you mentioned there the big battle, MasterChef, The Voice returning for 9 as well, and big ratings for both.
Yeah. Well, not big. MasterChef did pretty well in terms of what Ten's been doing lately. The Voice was just way out the leader. Put a bit of pressure on House Rules for 7. We'll have to see. They'll be looking for The Voice to pull back to maybe 2 or 3 nights a week. This week has been running 4 nights, done very well for 9. So, but MasterChef had a reasonable start.
Right, James, as always, thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Bridie.
James Manning there, editor and publisher of Media Week. That's all we have time for from the team here. Thanks for your company.